Mr. Winslow accused my mother of stealing his dead wife's jewelry. I explained it was impossible. He was welcome to search the tiny apartment I shared with my mother and aunt. He could look wherever he wanted. We share a tiny space, I said. We barely have enough room for our clothes. I don't even know where she would hide jewelry. I was worried we would lose him as a client, which would be bad because cleaning his house was basically the majority of our rent check. But a week later he found the pearl necklace. It had somehow traveled down to his basement. I'm still missing the gold bangle though, he said. And some earrings. I told him I was sorry, but I had no idea. If my mom or aunt found it on their next clean, I promised they would let him know right away. He hummed and hawed. There might have been a week where he hired a different maid service, but eventually he called back, asking if he could hire all three of us on site again. I thanked him profusely. I told him we'd keep an eye out for the missing valuables. On our drive over, I had my mom and aunt practice the apology we would give him in English. Even though we didn't steal anything, I explained we should still say sorry. Why? My aunt asked. That's so stupid. Everyone apologizes for everything in Canada. Just trust me. He will want it. We need the work, my mom said. For a second my aunt revved up to say something else, but then let it go. We did need the work. When we arrived, Mr. Winslow was on a phone call, watching his two large goldendoodles play in the front yard. He waved, then gestured to the front door. My mom and aunt gave small bows and carried their cleaning supplies inside. Before I could enter, he put the phone behind his ear and approached me. Ida, hi. Good to see you again. Listen, don't worry about the jewelry. Water under the bridge. Hey, I'm leaving in an hour or so, and I won't be back until late tonight. I'm wondering if you'd be interested in dog sitting. You've been around Toto and Kipper. What do you think? I'd really appreciate the help. I never liked the way he looked at me. It was always too close, and it lingered for too long. My aunt may have been right in that he hired us back just to see me again, but I ignored the thought. And don't worry, I can cover your cab back. My usual walker is just out on holiday. You can help yourself to whatever's in the fridge. How does 600 sound? I looked at his house and imagined if I would be comfortable there. Alone at night. I'll make it 700. I know it's last minute. I just hate leaving them alone. Plus Toto has his medicine. You would do me a real solid. My apron needed adjusting, so I put down my bucket. I focused on the polyester knot, keeping my gaze away from his. I really didn't want to be doing this, but my aunt would call me stupid for refusing easy money. And frankly, so would I. I had plans, but I'm willing to give them up. I said with a straight face. 800 and it's a done deal. He paused for a second, observing me scrupulously. Then he found his usual, smarmy half smile. You're a lifesaver, you know that. An angel. His hand gripped my shoulder. Then patted it twice. Both my mom and aunt were pleased about the extra cash. They said I deserved to make extra for all the bookkeeping I do. But they also both voiced their concerns for safety. They said they could stay with me if I wanted. Safety. Mame, I'm just watching two dogs. My mom wiped a caked red stain off his counter. An old wine spill. Yes, but so late in his house. You're not worried he might, I don't know. Might what? Exploit me. I met his groundskeeper once, another immigrant contractor. Except the groundskeeper was being paid far less, because he never properly negotiated. Mr. Winslow was certainly capable of exploiting people when he wanted to, and I'm sure he would try the same on my family. But I was different. I'd gone to school in Bannever, and I knew the little maneuvers played by the so-called progressive people in North America. And Winslow knew it too. He didn't realize a Canadian-raised daughter organized her mom's cleaning service. Or that she would show up on the first day as a statement. That statement being, you can't get away with mistreating these old Brazilian women. And you certainly can't swindle them out of the going rates in his neighborhood. I'm onto you. Asterisk. I had asserted myself with this Mr. Winslow, and felt confident that I could stand my ground if he tried to do anything. Mame, I'm not worried about him. Really, I'm not. He's a pushover. 6 p.m. rolled around, it was just me and the goldendoodles. My mom and aunt were back at home, watching low-res soaps on a MacBook, but they said if I encountered anything strange, a sound, a smell, an unexpected car in the driveway, to give them a call right away. Mame, it's 2 dogs. I'll be fine. Just keep your phone close, Ida. Your auntie has sensed things in that house. Unpleasant things. I forgot to mention my aunt thinks of herself as an amateur medium. In the village she grew up in, she claimed she could sometimes see people who were recently deceased. But I never really believed her. Mostly because it was also my auntie's idea to charge families who wanted to forward messages to the very same people who were recently deceased. Okay Mame, whatever you say. I'll phone you if I get scared. That house has a history, Ida, you could feel it in the walls. The outside too. It sure does. A history of being owned by a wealthy prick. The sun slinked below the overcast horizon like a dying lantern. It got dark much faster than I expected. I kept all the lights on, and played with the dogs a bit, trying to encourage them to try piss on the shag rug. Neither did. They mostly wanted naps. I tried napping for a bit too, but the leather couch felt like it was made of rock. I just couldn't get comfortable. Eventually I made myself dinner, some pasta that had been bought from Whole Foods, and ate it while scrolling on my phone. I was just about done, ready to take my dirty plate in the sink when I first heard it. The first explosion. It came from the basement. A vibrating kapow that rattled the windows and chandelier on my floor. It sounded like someone had set off a cherry bomb. What was that? I turned to the dogs who were just as scared as I was. They came whimpering with tails between their legs. Could a pipe have burst or something? I looked at the basement door, an area we were not instructed to clean, and then heard another explosion. Vases shook. A painting went tilted. It sounded louder. Like full-grade firework. I had lived in Rio de Janeiro, by Priana Beach, where they often launched celebratory fireworks. This was just as deafening. I didn't want to go down to the basement. In fact, I sat by the front door. Both dogs huddled around me. 20 minutes passed. It had been quiet. Out of pride I refused to call my mom. I didn't want to admit I was scared. Instead, I spent the time going through all the rational answers in my head that could explain away the noise. Plumbing, terrorism, teen pranks, hot springs. There were hot springs all over West Ban. Obviously, some kind of pent-up geyser had lay dormant for a while, and it was now suddenly unleashing a ton of energy below Mr. Winslow's house. To distract myself, I Wikipedia'd the history of West Bannever, and satisfied this theory. During the 1850s gold rush, West Bannever saw rapid settlement as a mining town. The proliferation of mine shafts soon led to a discovery of underground hot springs. Mayfield Briggs Limited, which was the first company to seize the opportunity as a tourist attraction. That's all it was. A hot spring releasing a buildup of pressure. Then a third explosion came. It was so loud and violent that the door to the basement flew open. I fell to the ground and covered my head as several books went flying off nearby shelves. The dogs yipped and barked like crazy. They stood in front of me, guarding against an unseen force. A voice shrieked from the basement. Help! Help! Rivets shot through my hands and knees. I was frozen to the floor. Please. It had the high-pitched desperation of someone whose life was about to end. I raised my head and listened closely to hear haggard, dusty coughing. It sounded like an old man's cough. It echoed through the basement and into the living room. Between coughs the man continued to plead for his life. Help! I had no idea who it could be or how he got down there. Before I could think, one of the dogs shot past me, bolting down the basement steps, barking ferociously. Kipper. I tried to grab the loose leash, but I could only hold the collar of his sibling. Kipper, come back here. Hello. The voice from below seemed to recognize my presence. Please, you've got to help. I was now upright, breathing as fast as Toto was panting. I tied Toto to the thick rails on the stairs. I had to save the other dog. Instinctually I grabbed my phone, slipped an AirPod in one ear, and dialed my mother without even looking at the screen. May, there's something terrible is happening. My mother was suitably confused. Even more so when she heard the screaming of the man downstairs as his voice echoed in the living room. It was a cry of immense, awful pain. After two slower, more detailed explanations of what I just heard, my mother told me to call the fire department. Poke your head through the basement, see what's happening. Then call the fire department. That made sense to me. I inched my way to the basement entrance and tried to see past the doorway. It was complete darkness. There was no light switch. I turned the torch on my phone, and my aunt's voice came blaring. Get out of there, Ida. I am telling you, there is darkness in that house. As I illuminated the dusty wooden stairs, I saw that they only lead to more pitch black. Yup, plenty of darkness here. There was some phone wrestling. My mother came back on. What is it? What did you see? Don't encourage her. Get her to leave. My auntie yelled in the background. I told them to pipe down because I could suddenly hear the gentle whimpering at the base of the stairs. The dog sounded close. Kipper, come this way. Follow my voice. I went down a few steps further, expecting the basement floor to appear any second, but there were only more wooden steps. How long was this staircase? Kipper. There was a flat, cold wall on my left, and no guard rail to speak of. I stepped down each step very carefully to maintain my balance, sliding my hand along the wall. Then the wall disappeared. I flew forward. I woke up lying face first on rocky floor. My phone was cracked next to me. My mother was crying in my ear. Ida, Ida, Ida. I looked up to see I was not at the bottom of someone's basement. There were lights all above me. Lanterns. They were illuminating a cavernous, rocky chamber that led to many tunnels with train tracks and wooden carts. I was in the opening of a massive underground mine. I coughed, and gave out a weak, "What? Ida, is that you? Or you?" My mom's voice faded. Before I could reply, I saw the crooked form of a man in tan coveralls, shaking the immobile body of another person in coveralls next to him. In fact, there was a small row of half a dozen miners all slumped against a blasted rock wall. There were bits of granite, wood, rope, and what looked like entrails splattered all throughout. "Oh, the cruelty," the one standing miner said. He went from body to body and jostled each of his coworkers. "Must I find you all like this, every time?" I crawled up to a half-standing pose and tried to see the face of the hunched-over survivor. My heart dropped. He had no face. The explosion which must have killed some of friends had also blasted away this man's entire sternum, neck and skull. The miner wasn't hunched over or leaning away with his head, he just simply had no head. And up there, floating right in the middle of where his face should be, were a set of eyeballs, glistening under the yellow lights. The eyes turned to me. "Oh. Why hello. Hello there." Terrified, I rose to complete standing and opened both my palms in a show of total deference. I don't know who you are or what this is." The headless miner walked toward me. I noticed he carried a pickaxe in his right arm. He gestured with his left to where his ear would be. "I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Had an accident." Despite him having no head, his voice still came from where his mouth would be. There was an earnestness in his speech. It might have had something to do with his very old-timey accent, but I still felt like he was trying to be friendly. "Another batch of faulty dynamite. Everyone's dead. But what else is new?" He brought his left palm to his face, perhaps to wipe away tears, but instead his hand traveled through his non-existent head to scratch a small portion of his back. "Been dead for many years, I'm afraid. But I've kept busy. Been a good man. Worked very hard for the boss upstairs." He gestured upwards with the pickaxe. I looked up, and out in the distance, I saw a large, ancient, set of wooden stairs that I must have fallen from. They extended far up into the mine's ceiling and kept going. "He's gotten good ore from me. Good, shining, golden ore. I have a knack for it, you see. The same knack that killed me so many years ago. It's probably what's still keeping me around though." He came closer. I could see he had brown irises, with one of the cataracts deteriorating into milky white haze. The eyes stared at me, unblinking. Because I'm not done, see. This mine isn't empty. I know there's more gold. Much more. And it's not all for the boss. No, I'm keeping some to myself. Don't tell him, but I've been stashing a large deposit for myself. It can't all be his, of course. It's my mine after all. Half these tunnels were dug entirely by me. So of course I deserve some. It's only natural. I lifted my hand and pointed at the staircase behind him. I mouthed very big, obvious words. I have to go back. I'm going back up those stairs. He shifted his body. His two eyes turned in the air as if they were still inside an invisible skull. I saw nerve endings at the back undulate and twist. Yes, that is the only way up. My heart was in my throat. At least I found some form of communication. I gestured to knee-height and nervously asked if he had seen a large, shaggy dog. Ah yes, I've seen the pooches. They come down here sometimes. When the booms don't scare 'em, that is. Haha. I gave a thumbs up. It felt like a ridiculous interaction with a ghost, or zombie or whatever this was, but at least it was working. I think I saw his little tail run over that way. They like the smell of the mineral spring. I turned behind to see the long tunnel he was pointing at. It was dimly lit by a chain of smaller lanterns. I thought I saw a flutter of movement, and I would have kept looking further if it wasn't for my aunt's voice that suddenly exploded in my ear. Asterisk burst. Ida. If you can hear us, we are calling the police to your location. Help is coming soon. Ellipsis quote. I winced and stepped back, which saved my life. I just so happened to step right out of the way of a pickaxe. It sparked the ground. I gasped and stared at the headless miner. His eyes were shimmering with a dark focus, staring directly at mine. Oh, I'll help you find the dog. I'll help you find whatever you want. But I'll need those clean new eyes of yours first. He swung at my head. I ducked. He went for the backswing. I ran. Stupidly, I ran in the opposite direction of the stairs. I ran straight into the long tunnel lined with dim lanterns. But I couldn't turn around. I had no idea how quick he could move. And the speed of his pickaxe felt supernatural. The tunnel was narrow, and lined with wooden tracks. I had to skip, run, jump over the panels with immense precision to make sure I didn't trip. Behind me, his voice chased. Go ahead. Run. I know where these all lead. I ignored the words and kept going. The tunnel bent left, then right, then left again. I ignored several exits before the tunnel spat me out into an open, cavernous room filled with dozens and dozens of minecarts. I investigated the room for anything useful. A far opposite wall appeared to be the site of the latest digging. Loose rock lay everywhere. There was a small mineshaft holding a chained-up cart. And something in the cart shimmered. It was gold. And not just ore either. There were bars, coins, medallions, and jewelry. Mrs. Winslow's bangles were right on top. Asterisk. I ran to the cart furthest from the entrance and ducked behind it, breathing heavily, coughing from all the dust. The headless man emerged from the tunnel, pickaxe raised and scanning where I could have hid. I may not be able to hear you. But I can follow footprints pretty easily, huh? I know you're in here. He grabbed the closest minecart available and pushed it into the tunnel entrance. With an immense show of strength, he lifted and dislodged the cart off the track, cramming it sideways, creating a massive obstacle. I was sealed inside. Trying to stay absolutely still, I coughed through my teeth. Lungs burning. My mom's voice came through. The police should be there. I told them you were in danger. They said they sent a unit over. Maybe they broke down the front door. I looked up at the mine shaft next to me. If it did connect to the surface upstairs, this was my only chance. I gave a couple good yells. Help. Down here. Help. I don't know if it did any good, but it was better than nothing. I turned to see if the miner had heard anything. He hadn't. The pickaxe tapped and clanged awkwardly around minecart after minecart. I had a bigger advantage than I thought. Although the miner had two floating eyeballs, only the left one was really capable of seeing anything. So I kept my distance and watched where he was going, always staying behind. As he limped and peered around minecarts, I was able to evade him, move from behind rock piles and other carts, careful not to leave a trail in the rock dust. It was all going well until I heard a familiar panting. Oh look, if it isn't Precious. The dog had managed to jump over the miners' blockade. It must have heard my yells. Surprisingly, Kipper was unafraid of the headless villain, and even approached him to receive pets. Now why don't you go say hello to our other friend here, huh? I know she's here somewhere. Kipper. Please. Don't. The dog started sniffing. Within seconds he found my scent. Kipper skipped towards me like Lassie and excitedly licked my face. Ah, there we are. Now isn't that a good boy? I stood up and stared at the filthy, ash-stained coveralls. Despite the lack of teeth, I could sense a menacing grin where the mouth should be. He wasn't going to lose sight of me now. I had nowhere to go. So I did the thing my auntie said worked on all spirits. I fell to my knees and prayed. Please, I only came here for work. I'm too young to die. Let me go and I won't tell anyone that you're here. He stood over me. Both of his pupils started to quiver. In just a few seconds, his eyes were swimming excitedly within the space of his head. I took off the only valuable I had. A gold necklace with a miniature version of Christ the Redeemer. A gift I had received as a teen in Rio. I held it out in my shaking hands. Please, take it. Take everything. Suddenly both the eyeballs stared forward again, entranced by the gold. Well, look at that. How generous. How generous of her. We should reward generosity, shouldn't we? It was hard for me to describe to the police officer how exactly I got out, because I have no idea. The fiery pain where my eyes used to be overwhelmed my entire reality for hours. All I wanted was for it to stop. They found me half inside a dumbwaiter bleeding to death from the gouges in my face. I was taken to the hospital, where I would spend the next 4 weeks recovering. The police did not in fact storm the house like my mom said. They waited outside for the homeowner to return. But when they heard my screams coming from the top floor, they broke the back door and eventually came to my rescue. I'm told they did a thorough investigation but could not find any of the things I described. The basement door led into a regular basement. It was filled with old furniture, unused decor, and paint cans. No mine. The dumbwaiter was also just a dumbwaiter. It wasn't some mine shaft, and it didn't lead any deeper than the basement. Nothing special. There were definitely hot springs close by, but nothing close enough to damage Mr. Winslow's property. And there was an old, depleted gold mine not far away either, but it was completely abandoned, closed off, and nowhere near as big as the one I had described. The police, paramedics and doctors all thought my story was some hallucination. That I had been on drugs or had some mental breakdown, even though they couldn't find anything in me other than small traces of weed. Thankfully, my mother and aunt believed me. They believed every word. My aunt is the one who encouraged me to make this post, so others could hear my story. I know it was real. I know it was. And Mr. Winslow is fully aware of the mine's existence. Putting the dots together, I realized it was likely the source of his wealth. Winslow had some control over that one headless miner down there. Did Winslow intentionally entrap me? Was he trying to get the miner a new set of eyes? Or was it all an unfortunate accident? I might never know. But what I do know is that Mr. Winslow has been paying for our rent ever since the accident. He feels, terrible about the situation, and, can't possibly imagine, what I've been through. But he knows what happened. He knows if I really pushed, if I really forced the police, or some private investigator to look into it, they would uncover something awful. Something really, really bad. Anything you need. Anything at all. I will cover it, Ida. He said. You helped me out, protected my dogs, and I will never forget it. He's offered to pay for the rest of my university schooling. And once my face heals up, he's even offered to cover for some very expensive, experimental eye transplant. We'll see how that goes. You and your family will live comfortably from now on. You'll want for nothing. Tell me exactly what you need, and you'll get it. So I told him I'd like my necklace back. It was an heirloom. I said I lost it somewhere in his house. A few days later, he returned with the usual smug, half-crooked smirk in his voice. He brought the necklace back in a box, pretending he had bought me a new one. Except it felt exactly like my old one. It was all shined up, completely buffed of scratches, but it weighed the same. It was my old one for sure. When my mom saw it, she asked, "Did it always have it?" This dedication. As far as I remembered, the backside of the tiny Christ the Redeemer was always plain. I fingered its shape in my hands. What dedication? The new little divots caught my nails. There was writing that was definitely not there before. My mom described it as a curly, serif font. Like a gift for a lover.